Okay, now let's take a look at how to do audio-reactive editing. So again, this will cover the editing portion of it. It will not cover sort of the visual effects. We'll do that in a different tutorial. So let's go ahead and connect to Google Drive. Again, we don't need a GPU for this because we're using FFmpeg, so we'll just use our default CPU. Now the other thing you'll need for this is an audio track. Probably musical works best, but you could use audio, like voice. We have to figure out what that actually looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and upload one of these files once I connect here. Okay. Let me upload one of these files here. I'm going to use this track from Vegan that I've been playing with and hope this doesn't get me demonetized, but if it does, so it goes. Okay, while this uploads, we're also going to install two libraries. One is called Librosa. That does a lot of our audio analysis, that sort of thing, and then we're going to upload Demux, which is our source separation tool. So we'll look at that next. That uploaded really quickly. Okay, Demux is our source separation tool. If you run this cell, this will show you all the output options. It can do like a karaoke mode, so if you only want the audio removed and you want to keep the rest of the track, you can go ahead and do that. By default, it converts it to 4 individual tracks. So there is a drum track, a bass track, a vocal track, and then what's called the other track. And that will usually be the melody, but it does kind of mix and match a bunch of stuff together. So you have to be aware of that. You'll see here there are a bunch of different options. You can output it to an MP3. You can convert it. You can output it as a wave. In general, I'm just going to use the default because it's pretty good. For this, because we're not really trying to get professional quality audio, we're just trying to get something more usable. We can go ahead and do that. So let me just go ahead and run this. And while this runs, maybe what I'll do is I'll go ahead and play this track. I don't know how well this is going to output to this microphone, but let's see. So let's play this track and you can kind of hear it. Okay, so you'll hear there was sort of that, like, I don't know, guitar or piano noise, which was sort of a nice melody, but not too fast, because one of the challenges with this stuff is if stuff moves too fast, it can make the whole thing feel really flickery, and I wanted it to kind of feel, like, emphasized. The other thing is you heard that, like, kind of nice drum track, which also helps for some of the rhythm, so this will actually work pretty well. But what I want to do is I want to be able to get out just that drum track, right? I want to get just the drum track by itself, and then I want to be able to get out that sort of guitar or melody and focus on that as well. And that's sort of what Demux is great at. It sort of allows you to separate those out without having to get into like audio EQing and banding and that sort of thing. It actually does stuff that you really can't even do with those tools. So this is now running. Looks like it's finished. And if you see where I put my output is I put my output to into my drive, Algo Film Demux. So I saved it to drive, my drive, Algo Film Demux, and then inside here is this thing called HT Demux. It's the model that it's actually using under the hood. It's the newest one, and I think it was probably the best, so go ahead and use that. And then in there is your file name, and then inside of there are your individual tracks. So let's go ahead and download one of these WAV files. And while this downloads, I'm going to go ahead and open up Audacity. So again, Audacity is a free open source waveform editor, which allows you to just sort of look at the wave files of things. So it can open an MP3, it can open a .wav file, it can open pretty much anything, which is just kind of nice, and it's going to allow me to sort of look at what my file looks like. And again, we'll actually do a lot of the editing and that sort of thing like directly in the notebook, but I find it's nice to sort of be able to see your waveform and edit it directly, or like at least play with it and move around and listen to what it sounds like. You can't really, you could probably get that with Colab, but you need something kind of fancy and interesting there. So for this, we're just going to go ahead and download this. Did it download? Did not download. Let me just see if I can grab it from my Drive account. Go into Algo Film, go into Demux, HT Demux, my file name, and then we're going to download the other. There it is. And then we're just going to open this with Audacity. If you do have Adobe, Adobe also has a similar product called Audition. So if you have like I don't know, the Adobe Complete package or whatever the hell they call it, you can also open it there. There we go. Okay, so here's my audio track. Now this is the other. This should be without drums, without bass, and without vocals. There are no vocals in this song, but without the drums. Let's see. It's pretty good. You can, if you were to listen to the file, you could actually kind of hear the drums a little bit in the background, but honestly, way better than you could do with anything else. So you hear that guitar, that's kind of what I want out of this track, so that's what we're going to use. So let's pause this, and let's go down back to our notebook. Okay, so we've now run demux, and that has separated out all of our audio. So there's two things we can do here. One is we're just going to look at the BPM of the file. This one you don't even really need to do anything but just feed it the original file. But in this case, I think actually feeding it the drums file is probably the best. Let's actually play the drums file. So we'll copy our path here to the drums file. We'll paste this in, and then we'll run this. Now, one thing that's a little tricky is that, a lot of songs don't start with drums in them. So if you are going to, work off the drum track, find when the drums actually start, because we're going to set our starting point for our file in just a minute. So make sure that you know where in your file the drums come in. For me, it's right at the beginning, really easy. You'll actually hear, that's pretty good. There's no melody that I can really hear there, so that's pretty good. Okay, so now we've like loaded in our file. So now let's go ahead and actually work with it. So let's copy in our path to the next cell. And then we have a starting point and we have a length. And so starting point is how far into the song we want to start. So if your drums start 30 seconds into the song, you want to set this to 30, just because it might just be empty sound and it can't really process the BPMs of empty silence, and then you want to set a reasonable length. So like, a reasonable length would be like 20 seconds. The reason we do this at a shorter speed now is that if we load in the full, 6 minutes of audio or whatever, if you have a long song, it slows down the process. And we really only need a short clip to be able to figure out the duration or the BPM of this. So I'm going to set this back to 0 for me, because mine starts at the beginning, yours might start elsewhere. And then I would say, let's do a length of 20. Let's go ahead and run this. All right, so what did we get out? We got out a tempo, and the tempo is 117.45. So that means there are 117.45 beats per minute. Now, I happen to know this song is actually labeled, when you upload it, it's actually labeled by the artist, and they say it's 120 BPMs. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's like they just sort of roughed it out, or if it's actually 120 BPMs and this give me a wrong number. But either way, this number works. I've played with it before, so it seems fine. And this is deterministic. You always get back the same number for your audio file. These numbers here we'll look at in just a second, but this is the into the second every beat. So there is a beat on 0.69, a beat on 0.55 seconds, a beat on 1.06 seconds. This is every beat. Now remember, this stuff does take a little bit of knowledge about music and that sort of thing. Most pop music songs are 4/4, meaning there's 4 beats, and every 4 beats is what's called a bar, and that bar is, builds up to 16 bars, whatever. So most pop songs are going to be 4 beats per bar, and I would generally say a bar is a good actual sequence to work off of. You could do every beat, but that's going to be kind of fast, and especially at 120 BPMs, that's pretty fast. It means there's going to be 120 cuts per minute, which actually means a half-second cut for every sequence. So that's kind of a lot. That's actually what we did in the rhythm section, but it's still quite a lot. So I probably wouldn't do that for a whole 4-minute track. That would be way too many cuts. So instead, what I think we should do is let's work off of the bar. So every 4 beats. If your song is in 6/8 or some other weird time signature, like you might need to play with it a little bit to figure it out. But in general, you can kind of guess that it starts with 4 and it'll generally work, because that's probably the majority of songs. So if I run this cell, this tells me the difference between this and this, so beat 1 and beat 4 is, that's not correct. It should be this length. So every 4 beats is 1.5 seconds. That feels like a nicer like cut length for me. So that's sort of what we get out of this. Now, before we go and do this, we actually want to go back and process our entire track. The reason why I do this is because we want to actually do the edits from every single, like the beginning to the very end. This is just helpful to sort of quickly rough it out. If these numbers look completely off, maybe it's interpreting the song wrong. I couldn't really say. I've only ever really played with this in this context, and it's usually right for me. The only good thing is like maybe it like reads at half speed or double speed, and that would be the tempo then, but that seems unlikely to me, but it's possible. But anyway, let's go back. So the way to actually go from the start to the end is, instead of entering in the length, is actually just do -1. So if I do -1 for both of these values, that's going to give me from the very beginning to the very end, and it will ignore anything else. So we can go ahead and now run this. And if I come back down here, we'll see that now my numbers here are much, much longer. Much, much longer. And this number should still be the same, I hope. All right, it's slightly different. There's a reason for that, but it's okay if it's slightly off. If it's off by like 0.1 decimal points or whatever, it's probably good. Next, let's actually run this cell. So this cell is going to take all of these values. And again, we're only going to look at between beats 1 and 4. So we're going to look at every 4th beat. And we're going to process the duration. Now, when I run this, you're going to see something here, which is that it's not even. So you will see in many of the instances here, the first one's almost always off a little bit. That's fine. The second one is 2.02. The next one is 1.997, 1.997. Looks like there's a 1.974 in here. Now, why are these numbers not consistent? Well, there's a couple reasons why it could be. One is the drummer could not be that good of a drummer and not keep time. But actually more likely is just that there's always, the way these models work is they look at a window of time. And there's always a little bit of shifting because, to calculate this number on the exact frame is going to be kind of difficult. Now, the reason that we want to do this is because when we cut our clips, we actually want to cut our clips to this number. We don't want to make up some number that looks like this, right? Because this number is, well, first off, it's not accurate. We should actually do this. We should do 7 to 4, 7 to 3. Yeah, that's better. So this is the actual number, 1.997. Your first value is always a little off, so this is probably a better number. So I'll leave that in the notebook. The reason is that because we only have 24 frames of visuals, you don't want to just convert this to a frame count. Because what will happen is like maybe it's off by 1 less frame than it really should be most times. And then as you begin to stack them, it's going to become more and more out of sync. So actually using these times is going to be important to us because we want these times, because it's going to push our clip more or less to the right beat in case we're off by a frame or two if we were to calculate it individually. So you'll see that some of these numbers are larger than 1.997, and this is going to help keep our clips on the beat, for lack of a better term. So this is a very helpful thing, and this is what we really want to get out. And this duration has been processed on the entire length of the song. So I think this even does do tracking if the beat changes. I think there's some additional code for that. So if that is something that happens in your song, you really want to pick that up. I would almost recommend maybe even cutting your song into pieces using Audacity wherever you know the speed changes, because it's more likely going to be like accurate there than it would be to try and use Librosa to try and track different changes in speed. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now what we're ready to do next is we are ready to actually convert our set of clips to this. So let's go ahead, and this next cell just sort of gives us the shortest or the longest duration. right? So we saw there was that long duration of 2.02 seconds. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the clips that I want to use, and I'm going to look at the duration of them because we stored that using ffprobe previously. And I want to make sure all my clips are no shorter than 2.02 seconds. The reason for that is because if I try to grab a clip and try to stick it in a section that needs to be 2.02 and it's too short, it's going to throw everything off, right? So we kind of have to dump a bunch of our options, which might be too short. There's other ways around this, right? I could like double up that clip. I could do other things. But for this, it's kind of like down and dirty, and it works quickly for me, and it produces a good number of results for me. If this length were 16 seconds, you might not have long enough clips for that. I think it'd be rare if you have a beat that is that slow. And if you do a beat that slow, you might want to even change it to on the ones or instead of on the fours, whatever. So this is our min length now. So now we're going to go ahead and run through our clips. So this works just like anything else. You can go ahead and grab your clips folder. So we'll go ahead and go to Algo Film. We'll go to clips. And let's work off of, sorry, not in clips. We want to add the JSON files. So let's work off of video_clips. We'll copy this. And let's do this with just my X-Files videos. So I'm going to do X-Files, and that will give me just the X-Files clips from this data set. And then we'll also go in and make sure that all of my durations are correct, or like matches. I will only keep clips of this length or longer. Let's go ahead and run this. There we go. So the total number of clips it found are 2,315. There's a lot of clips. And the total number of clips I actually need are 63. So we have way too many clips. This will be a moment where I think next week we'll look at how to create like more algorithmically correct capture of selected video clips. So like next week we'll look at doing this plus maybe looking at shot type or colors or other things, and we'll be able to sort of categorize by that. And that might get our numbers down. Instead, what we'll do this week is we'll just randomly pull 63 clips from this set. So again, this is, I could use the Mulder-Scully thing to pull out those clips or whatever. But for this, we're just going to run a random selection. So that's what this next cell will do. So we'll run this. And this gives me back all of the, whoa, that's wrong. Interesting. Why does my filter keyword not work here? Okay, I see what the issue is here. And filter in okay, let's run this again. I knew that number was too large. I was like, there weren't 2,300 clips in that in the pilot of X-Files. That would be crazy. So let's run this and see if this works better. Oh, now it found nothing. What happened here? Okay, it's fixed now. Sorry, I just can't do that live while we're trying to record. Too much stress. It worked. So now I've got a much more reasonable 394 clips from X-Files that are at least this length of 2.02 seconds, and I only need 63, so this is much better. So now I'll run this cell again, which is just going to randomly grab 63 of those clips. And you'll see all of these are now labeled the X-Files. Next, we can now go ahead and combine all those clips and cut them up to the right length. So I'm going to run this cell, which just sets up some code for me for future sessions. And again, what we're going to do here is, if we look at the duration of this number here, we are going to take our first clip that has randomly been selected and cut it to 1.56 seconds. Then we're going to take the next clip and cut that to 2.02 seconds, and then 1.997 seconds for the next clip, and on and on and on. And what we'll do eventually is we will then recombine that. So let's call this X-Files, and we'll call it on the beat. And now let's take a look at what the dimensions are for that. So in general, I kind of recommend that to start with things that are all the same dimensions, like the same video clip. It's just a little bit easier to work off of, because if you don't, then you might run into issues that we've kind of run into in this class before, which is of stuff that basically the dimensions don't match up, and then maybe you get errors here or there. Also, if your frame rate is off, that can sometimes throw these things off. It should fix it when it actually produces the clips, but I haven't played with it that much, so I'm not entirely sure. I just want to check to see here. There we go. So my frame rate is 23.98. My dimensions are 1280 by 720, so let's go ahead and enter that in. 80, 720. And then you want to link this back to the audio path here. Should go to your original song, right? Because we don't want just the drum track. I mean, maybe we do. Actually, let's do that for this. That'll be okay. It doesn't really matter. But for the other one, we'll look at how to do that with the entire song. So link this to whatever audio you actually want to play in the video. In a lot of cases, that will be the original song, which I believe I have here. So I'd copy that path. Instead, I'm just going to add the drums to it just so you can see what it looks like with a very much on the beat sort of work. So I'm going to run this. This, again, will take a little bit of time. It's 63 clips that we're going to shorten, save to a temporary folder, and then concatenate them together and then add the audio to it. So I will step away while this runs, and then we'll come back and take a look at the output. Okay, so this only took about 5 minutes to make, so it's actually faster than the other notebook. Wow. But let's go ahead and play this and take a look at what we get. Okay, so you will notice that it plays on the beat, right? So one, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, you might also notice if you were to play this that sometimes the beat like filters out a little bit, but like this tool doesn't care about that. It only looks at BPM, so it really isn't really even looking at the audio that much. It's maybe offsetting or accounting for a little bit of that slippage here and there, but for the most part it's not really doing anything that fancy. It's just taking the BPM and sort of saying like, okay, every 4 beats we're gonna do this, every 4 beats we're gonna do this. Now I think this is nice as like a base layer, but you do want something else that feels more reactive to the actual audio, and we'll look at that next. So this works, it's good, it gives you a nice solid sort of like rhythmic edit if you want something like that. But with this sort of like random array of clips, it kind of feels a little random in many ways. Let's take a look at the next way to do this, which would be to actually look at what are called onsets. So down here, we'll go ahead and look at our onsets. So I recommend you use onsets on your melody. So you should have a good track that has some sort of melody that feels a little bit different than on the beat. You could try doing this with like vocals. I don't really know what that looks like, or the bass line. If you have a strong bass line in a song, that might also work. But it should feel a little bit like different than the beat. It should feel less than like that 1, 2, 3, 4. It should feel like somebody's doing a little bit different on top of that. Let's go ahead and grab our other track, literally the file called other, from our, let's see, I put mine in Drive, My Drive, Algo Film, Demux. You gotta dig in, and then you find the other track. Okay, I'll go ahead and paste that in, and we'll play it. So notice there's like that like longer tone, and then a shorter tone, then a shorter tone, then a longer tone. It kind of has a little bit more of a pacing to it, which feels nice. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do this thing called onsets. I am not an audio expert. I don't really understand exactly how this works. I just know it does. But I'm going to show you a couple little tricks to actually get it to do what you want it to do. Okay, so first song, we're going to take our path here, and we're going to paste our path in. And again, we're going to work with a really short clip. So let's work with something that starts at 0 and then let's say 15 seconds. This is actually really important for this part that you don't give it too long of a length, because then it's going to be really hard for us to actually evaluate how well it works. I'll show you that in a second. Let's go ahead and run this cell, which is just going to load that in. You'll see here that it's now providing a bunch of numbers. You might be able to guess that maybe that is the guitar tone, right? So it's saying the guitar is at like 0.55 seconds, 0.719 seconds, 1 second, etc. Now this is helpful, but like let's actually graph this and see what it looks like. The next cell will actually graph that data and show us where our onsets are hitting regarding compared to the waveform. And you'll see here, like, look, because this is 15 seconds long, it's actually like kind of hard to tell what these rhythms actually look like. And if I look at this, I can kind of already tell that this isn't right. This isn't what I want, because it's possible that like this note here is the guitar, and then maybe the next guitar is here. Like it's picking up a lot of other noise, and that's very common with these tools because, you know, especially with DMUX, like it's not giving me the clean guitar sound. It's giving me the guitar plus other things happening with like a keyboard or other parts, and that's then leading to like some noise. And if we actually go in and look at these numbers up here, if we open these in Audacity, so here is our other track, and you can actually punch in these numbers down here. So let's say I want the, let's look at 0.719. So you can, down here you can actually put in, I think it's this one, 0.719. That's going to take you, the thing you can do here is if you zoom in, you can pinch to zoom and scroll all the way to the beginning and see where 0.79 is here. So I hit play. I hit play. Okay, so there was, looks like there's a note like around 3 seconds. Now is that getting caught by this detection system? Let's see. So it should be around 3, right? There's that big note. So that's probably about 3 seconds right there. There's that big note. And if I look around here, it's probably there. It's probably that one. But the problem is there's all this other junk here, right? So this is where we kind of get into like a little bit of playing around. Again, I don't necessarily understand how this stuff works, but I've played with these values enough to sort of figure out what I want to do. So in the next plot down here, we're going to actually play with some values. So by default, this thing I believe does this. It works at 8,256. Let me just make sure it's right. Maybe it's 128. Let's try this. So if we plot this again, we should get pretty much the exact same graph we see above. And actually we see a slightly nicer graph. This is missing some of these noisy parts in here, right? It's actually kind of a little bit cleaner already. But let's see if we can clean this up even more. I've played with this a little bit, so I kind of know that if I lower my Fmax value, let's go to 2400, and if I increase my Nmels value, I should get like a smoother output. And what I'm really looking for are these red lines, because these red lines are going to then determine my cut points in my edit. So if I scroll on here and run this again, I'm definitely getting cleaner. It's getting cleaner, but it's not perfect yet. So let me keep playing with this more. I believe I set it to like 1200, and I want to set it was like 312. Let's run that. Much better. See, now look at this. I don't know what this spike is. Maybe we can actually play the Audacity track and try to figure it out. Let me scroll back to the beginning here. If I place my cursor here at the beginning. Okay, so that's at about 1 second. Needs more numbers here. Let's see. Divide this by 5. It looks like it should be about that. So that actually looks like it's about 1 second right there. So that's probably about the right place. Now, if I want to get these back in here, like say I want these smaller spikes, I might be able to do that by playing with this a little bit more. If I crank this up to 1800 and I move this down again, see, but now I've got too many. So this is, again, it's like this it's like this game of like kind of moving stuff around until I get exactly what I want. Let's try one more here. Okay, there we go. So again, you kind of have to play with these values. Now I'm still seeing stuff in here that is too much. In my point of view, I would always go for less onsets, less of these cuts than more, because more is going to feel kind of like frenetic. Maybe, again, it depends on the song you're using. I'm going to set mine back down to 1200 and move this back up to whatever it was, 312 or whatever. 318 is probably fine. I think there's a big difference between like little number spikes. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. So within 15 seconds, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cuts. That feels about right. Something around a second and a half feels good to me. Okay, so now we're sort of, at this point, we've now set our key points, and now we can run the exact same process over again. So we're going to go ahead and grab all of our durations. So here are our durations. So I could even go into Audacity and go down here, and I could even plot these, or I can put in this point. So 9, 8, 8. Yep, so that's that note. And then come over here and go 1.977. And I hit play. Okay, that was like a softer note, but it was still there. And then, interesting, what are these other ones? Why is that 0.488? Oh, sorry, these durations. Oh my god. So that's not the right point. What I want to look at are these. Sorry, that's crazy. So what I actually want to look at are these numbers. So it's 1.068. Sorry, it's getting kind of late here. 068. So that's that note. And then it's 3.065. So that's close enough. Yep, there's that note. So you can see this is actually pick up the notes I want it to pick up. And that's the key here is I might be seeing notes that I want to pick up, and you might be seeing notes you don't want to pick up, or there are more notes you want to pick up. So you have to play with this according to what you want to achieve. So play with these values. Again, like lower here and higher here is going to smooth it out more. Whereas you raise this and lower this, you're going to get more spikes and more cuts. But at this point, I can now run this to grab my durations. So again, the one thing I would need to do is I want to go back and actually run this on the entire length of my song. So what I need to do is I want to go -1, -1. So I'm using the entire song, run this cell again. And then I'm going to skip over this cell because this is the garbage one that didn't really produce what I wanted. I'm going to run this cell, which gives me the accurate values that I wanted. And one thing you'll notice here is when this finishes plotting, because this is a 2.5 minutes long song, it's really hard to see all these cuts. And this is why you start with a shorter amount. It allows you to sort of figure out like where the right points are. Another thing I'm going to notice is that I think there's something else going on here in the song. Now I happen to know I actually like went through this yesterday or the day before and figured out that like what happens is a lot of the soundtrack, the melody dies out. It like fades out in this section. What happens is the drums bleed through a little bit. And because the drums are bleeding through, this is actually catching the drum track. Now, it actually produces a good video. I kind of like the results because, again, it gives me like what you'll see and what I've talked about before is like you don't want that repetition, that just like over and over and over again, just doing the same thing. But a little bit of variation like this is kind of nice because you see there's like some moments where it's very long and very spread out. And there's moments where there's lots of cuts. And this is a nice edit, right? This is like what you would look like in like a movie or like other things. This is an edit that feels paced and it feels like it's got difference and it feels like there's enjoyment in this piece of like little details that might change. You're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that sort of thing. So this is an ideal edit for me, from my perspective. Okay, now we need to run duration because we've got way more clips we want to edit. There we go. So there are all the pieces. And then what we want to do is, again, we want to grab what's the max length. And we should output that. So here's the difference. I need a clip that is at least 4 seconds long. This is like double the length of the previous one. That's because that last clip has no... It's probably where the song fades out, so it's got no onsets there. I could skip that one. I could even say, like, I believe I could delete that one and then grab any of them from those durations. Actually, I believe what I would do is let's see if this works, -1. Oh, brackets. Oh, it's because there's still a really long one in here. So even if I remove that last one, there still would be a really long one in there. So whatever, we're stuck with this this length. So it is 4 seconds. So what we'll do is we'll go again through our X-Files clips here. We'll go, oh, except I need to edit my code because I made that edit before. Grab the code here. Oops, that's not the right cell. Sorry, everyone. This is the right cell. So let's see how many clips we end up with if we do just the X files and we look at our 4-second clips. I think we'll still be fine, but let's just see what we get. All right, barely eked by. We got a total of 209 clips, and we're looking for at least 114. So again, we'll just randomly, for this week, we'll just randomly sample from 114 of them. And then what we'll do is we'll run our next cell, which will just combine everything. And we want to update this to 1280 by 720. And we'll call this X Files Audio Cutup. And then what we'll do here is we will use our original track. Because again, we don't want the drums in this one because we actually want to show how it matches up to that guitar sound or that melody sound. Let's run this. And I will stop this because I don't know how long it's going to take, but I'll be back when this is finished. And then we can take a look at the final product. All right, let's see how we did. Pretty good. I will say that I think those very high notes that I would maybe want to include don't get included, and I don't know what to do about that. So maybe I go and play with the filtering a little bit more, or maybe I even do like a high pass filter to only keep in the highs and then work off that. It's probably other things I could do, but I kind of find that this is like a nice way to get some variation. It obviously matches up with the song, which feels nice and interesting, and it's not super repetitive. Where like as the song changes, I'll upload, you can see in that middle section it does some interesting stuff as well. So yeah, so that's Audioreactive. One last thing I want to mention in the notebook is, oops, that's not the notebook. In the notebook is I've also added the EDL file output, so you could also output this to an EDL file. Again, if you're finding that some of the PySync Detect trims aren't working correctly, you could go in and sort of move some stuff around and trim it up a little bit nicely. Maybe you want to add in a couple extra clips where you feel like it missed something. I find this process gets you about 80-90% of the way there, but you would definitely need to do a little bit of polish at the end, or use really high-res video or whatever you want to do. But in general, I think this is pretty cool, and you could make a music video off this like fairly easily. I mean, this is almost fully automated now. Really interesting process. So again, that's Audioreactive. That's two different techniques. One is a little bit more mundane, but I think it's a good solid base. And the other one's a lot more interesting to play with, and I think you can even mix and match those two, right? Maybe you find a section where it only needs that repetitive beat, and then you find other sections where you play off the melody, that sort of thing. So I think there's some really interesting offerings here, opportunities here. So take a look at them, and I hope you find something interesting to make and that you share it with us in the Slack channel. All right, we got one last video to cover, which is doing the video effects using Audioreactive. A little outside the scope of this class as usual, but like I would still like to share it just so people can see it. So let's move over to that now. Thanks.